Thanks, Jacob. The ANC Spy Bible, Surviving Across Enemy Lines, is a memoir by former head of the South African Secret Service, Mr. Moe Shaik. It's been called a thrilling read where he takes the reader into some of the most turbulent and uncertain parts of South Africa and writes candidly about working with former President Jacob Zuma. Mr. Shaik, on that note, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So it took about 4 years for this book to come out. It was first a novel. I mean, why the need to tell your story through this work?
Well, I always thought this is a good story to tell, particularly because of the role of the nightingale. And initially when I started this work, I thought it would be best as a novel, because the novel will allow you as a spy to put certain things out there, but without the fact-checking and all of that, and without getting permission. But the publishers thought, no ways, this has to be a memoir. So this was it. I worked with my editor, Mike Nickel, for about 8 to 9 months every day to turn from the novel to the memoir.
Yeah, so during interviews you kept on saying it's not about changing perceptions or rewriting history. It's just it's just solidifying what happened during your experience of this war.
Correct.
But looking at South Africa, where we find ourselves, I mean, we can see we're in a technical recession, the unemployment, the growing dissatisfaction among South Africans at large. What do you make of a South Africa post-democracy?
Well, I think we have challenges. I think we have reached, in many ways, the end of the honeymoon period. We're now into that very difficult period where we have to rely on the spirit of South Africans to come together, to be able to solve their problems like we did. If we could change apartheid, then clearly we can change this economy around if we just rely on the method that we use to change apartheid. And that method is a very simple one. A, come together. B, define the consensus to take us forward, but have a vision for the future. And I think that is why the negotiations worked so well. The negotiators constructed a vision for tomorrow and then built that vision, and we have to do the same thing now all over again. Of course, there's much more tension in the country.
Yeah.
But if we rely on what makes us great, and that is being South Africans and being able to come together when we have difficult challenges.
Themes of trust, themes of healing emerge through the book.
Yes.
You see it very, very early on. I mean, you're looking at when your mom or stepmom passed away, looking at your relationship with former President Jacob Zuma, even Thabo Mbeki, former President Thabo Mbeki. Looking back, did you feel betrayed by them?
Betrayed is a strong word, but the feelings of betrayal, the feelings of being deeply disappointed, deeply let down. Yes, I would have to tell you that I have felt very deeply disappointed in the way things turned out. And I think it's harder when you have placed your life in the hands of such leadership to be disappointed by them. It's like a love affair, when you give yourself to one person and if they break your heart, it's so much more harder to recover, isn't it?
Yeah. So you also speak about power, how it changes people. You spoke about, I don't want to misquote you, but you were saying also looking at how it changes people, democracy, when you don't actually... The longer you get away from when democracy is actually instituted, you tend to forget the history, you tend to forget what it actually took for this to happen. Also the trauma that people went through.
Yes.
Do you think that is somewhat becoming a distant memory amongst South Africans, amongst the leadership to date, just based on what we're seeing unfolding?
Unfortunately, that is the case. They call it social disconnect. The longer you stay in the job and the longer that job keeps you away from the passion that you once had, as you get on with the job and you become very technocratic, you forget the passion, you forget the values, you forget why you are doing this. And I think, if anything, the book is a reminder that ultimately and fundamentally why people got involved in the ANC and in the liberation for our country was to change the lives of our people, to construct a better future. And we need to remind ourselves constantly, I think politicians need to remind themselves constantly, that they are in that job to change the lives of South Africans for the better. They need to have urgency. They need to know that they are in those offices that they occupy because many people died for this. And they must get on with the job and bring the best skill that they can into that job so that the job gets done.
You also speak about your own personal transformation through the book. During your brother's court case, there were some perceptions about you and the way your brothers were perceived, sort of arrogant somewhat by many. Looking back in hindsight, looking how much you've grown, also embracing your authentic self. How would you say those have been dispelled? How would you say you've grown? What would you have done differently?
Well, this process, and the book is fundamental, and I'm so glad you picked it up. The book is fundamentally about healing. It's about my journey through life up to now and how I have addressed some of the things that have been difficult for me to deal with. So I've healed in the process and I will continue healing. But I think in the healing you engage with, again, another beautiful word you use, your authentic self. And I think when you embrace your authentic self, when you peel your onion, you come to the core, right? Of course, there's a lot of tears in that process. And I like the way I am now. And I like the fact that I could be open once again like I was when I was a very young boy. And in the process, of course, people will have their views about the Shaik family. They'll have their views about me. I accept that. But if they truly want to judge me, not that I'm into the process of judging, then find my soul in this book. This is me, they.
We're looking at the inquests that are also coming out. I mean, early on in the book, you speak about your time during detention, some of the traumas you experienced. We can see the Neil Agard inquest that's currently unfolding, and many other families are stepping up, seeking justice and retribution. Why do you think it's taken so long for families to get justice for some of the atrocities that they faced and occurred as during apartheid?
It just goes back to the point that the pain that was suffered in that period just simply doesn't go away. And I think these families need closure. We need closure. And I think the way these inquests and so forth were dealt with in the past needs to be revisited, needs to be looked at. But also this is a lesson for current South Africa. Many prisoners or many people kept in detention or incarceration by the police also die currently in this South Africa. So beware, these inquests come back to haunt you. So there must be thorough investigations, there must be no cover-ups. Where responsibility needs to be laid bare, that responsibility must be taken. So I think in this inquest, there is a lesson for those in the past who committed those atrocities. And I think in this inquest, there are lessons for us today that we need to be absolutely proper in the way we manage people who are given over to the state for the purposes of investigation.
What was the hardest part of the book to paint your thoughts to paper?
The hardest part?
Yeah.
Well, the hardest part was dealing with accepting that I became a spy because I was searching for an answer to a question, And that was hard to accept that, I was actually dealing with feelings of abandonment, dealing with issues, and that sense of feeling of abandonment drove my personality. And having to look at that, in very cold reality, that much of who I was or became was because I felt abandoned.
I'm looking at how you've mentioned embracing your authentic self as something that, has been your life's purpose to date. You love music.
Oh, I love
we
music.
were chatting about this earlier on. What sort of music do you like? I mean, what is your favorite artist?
So I'm attracted to music that just simply moves my heart. It doesn't really matter, you know, and I must tell you, when I grew up, and this is a very funny story, you know, I grew up in a colored area, and there was a thing called black music, and you only listen to black music. If any one of you listened to any white music, you know, you're like, oh, you were in trouble.
Yes.
But secretly, I enjoyed music. It didn't matter whether it was black or white or whatever. Recently, I find myself attracted to music that's coming out of the continent. And my favorite artist, and I mention her here, is a woman by the name of Sona Jobate. Now, she plays a wonderful instrument, and it's a kind of oud, which is played in West Africa.
Yes.
She plays it beautifully, and her voice is just simply divine. And I would recommend to your listeners, listen to Sona Jobate, and the favorite song that I put down here for me is called Ya Rabbi, which is love.
So, I mean, on that note, would it be befitting to ask you what that sounds like, seeing as you are a musician at heart, and you can also sing? Give us a line, Mo.
Give you a line?
Give us a line of your favorite artist.
There's a grief that can't be spoken. There's a pain that goes on and on. Empty chairs at empty tables, where my friends are dead and gone. Yeah, they spoke of revolution, yet it was they lit the flame. Thank you.
Drops mic. Thank you. The book is entitled The ANC Spy Bible. Again, thank you to Mr. Moe Shaik for serenading us and also chatting to us about his latest endeavor, The ANC Spy Bible. Again, thank you to him for sharing his story with us and the rest of our 405ers.